Hey Zoo, Gordy here yet again with another Tuesday message here from the comfort of my beautiful apartment in Escondido. Hopefully all of you are doing well. Thanks again for watching this. And today we're continuing on in week 3 of our Be Still series, where we have been just walking through what does it look like in a time of life where although we have more time on our hands, although we are stuck probably at home or doing a lot less things than we normally would, how also in a time where there's confusion, there's more disappointment, there's more frustration, there's more all of this stuff weighing on us or going on in our lives, how do we take that time to do what we should do, which is be still and just allow God to be God. Stop worrying or stop trying to fix things on our own, and just simply allow ourselves to sit in the presence of God and allow Him to take control and allow Him to solve the situation and allow Him to be God, the most important thing for us in our lives. And so today we're going to talk about what does it look like to sit in God's presence and yet sometimes feel like that all you're getting back in return is silence. Because I think one of the most frustrating things with practicing prayer or requesting stuff of God or sitting in silence is sometimes it feels like we are putting in so much work, so much effort, and we hear nothing from God back in return. And I don't know about you, but that is one of the most frustrating things for me sometimes, is to sit in the presence of God and to hear nothing in return. Today we're going to read a passage in John chapter 11. So if you have your Bibles, open it up to John chapter 11. If you don't, go get them, pause the video. It's a pretty famous story, one that if you've gone to church for a while, you've probably heard before. But John chapter 11 says this. It says, "Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, 'Lord, he whom you love is ill.' But when Jesus heard it, he said, 'This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it.'" I want you to remember that passage in verse 4, okay? Because it's going to come into play later on. You see already in verse 4 that Jesus already has a plan. He says, "This illness does not lead to death, for it is the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Continuing on in verse 5, it says, "Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard this, Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, 'Let us go to Judea again.' The disciples said to him, 'Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you are going there again?' Jesus answered, 'Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him.' After saying these things, he said to them, 'Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him.' The disciples said to him, 'Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover.' Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, 'Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him.'" We're going to keep reading the story in a second, but we see right off the bat, Jesus and his disciples are in one area, and Mary and Martha send word, and they say, "Hey, Lazarus is really ill. You need to come quick. He needs help. He needs you." And the crazy part about this story, that I think a lot of people read this and they go, "Well, I just don't understand why Jesus made this decision." We see that Jesus doesn't do anything. He stays put. He doesn't. And it makes it clear in the beginning that Jesus loves Lazarus, and if you love somebody and you know that they're ill and you can help them, the response is to immediately go. The response is to respond and go, "How can I help? How can I get there as quick as possible?" But Lazarus doesn't do anything. Jesus doesn't do anything. He stays. And it says he dies. And I think it describes a feeling for Mary and Martha of they so plainly request something of Jesus. And instead of getting an answer, they get silence. They get nothing. They get nothing in return. And I think it's a feeling that a lot of us have experienced at some time or another in our life. Not even necessarily with God, but we know that one of the most frustrating things to feel is this feeling of silence or no response. Maybe you've asked something of somebody, or maybe you have made a request or whatever, and you get nothing in response from them. That is one of the most frustrating feelings because it just leaves you hanging. It leaves it unknown. Like it's not even a no. Like at least when people say no to you, you can like move forward because you know what their answer is. When you get no response, that's so frustrating because you don't know if it's a yes, you don't know if it's a no. You're just left in this unknown period going, which way do I go? How do I move forward? This is a weird thing to say, but there was this funny phase of high school where I thought it was really funny to watch proposal videos gone wrong. And I know some of you, the reaction for most people should be, wow, Gordy, you are a really soulless, terrible person. And I agree, okay? To me, they're not funny anymore, okay? But there was this weird time where I would watch them, and the reason I thought they were funny was not because it was necessarily some poor guy getting his heart broken, but the part I enjoyed was this weird moment where the guy gets down on one knee and he makes this big, and usually it's like just this big fantastic proposal. The worst ones are at like public sporting events and you're on the big screen and everybody can see the embarrassment. But the guy gets down on one knee and he's planned it and he's got a speech and he pours his heart out to the girl. And the part that I always thought was hilarious was the awkward pause or silence in between when the guy says, "Will you marry me?" and the girl just trying to figure out, what do I do? I clearly don't want to marry this person, or I'm not ready yet, or I'm just shocked by what is happening. And there's always like, very rarely does the girl just like immediately respond with no. Normally what takes place is there's just this really awkward pause. And like the guy can kind of figure out what's happening. He starts to get nervous, and the girl's panicking because she doesn't want to seem like a jerk, but she also doesn't want to commit to him for the rest of her life. And so there's just this weird pause, and the silence is so terrible and so uncomfortable. And it wasn't until, this phase was short in my life, and I quickly realized this is a terrible thing to really enjoy watching. But now that I have also gone through a proposal process, I really don't think it's that funny anymore because thankfully, Megan did not say no or even give me a terrible pause when I proposed, but I remember that day. It was July 1st, 2019. I put all of this time, all of this effort, all of this energy into this proposal, and I was the most nervous I have ever been in my entire life. I was more nervous on my proposal than I was on my wedding day because she had already said yes at this point, and I just remember being so nervous that entire day and all of this stuff, and I'm like, it has to go perfectly because I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I would have freaked out if one simple part of the process or the plan had gone wrong. And I remember like seconds before I proposed, like right on the beach at this fancy beach house, and I had it all set up, and her walking down these stairs to the beach where it was set up, somehow I was hiding behind a bush. I missed her walking down the stairs, so I didn't even realize she was there yet. And all of a sudden, she's around the corner, and I was like, and I freaked out, and I'm like, I don't know, I forgot everything I wanted to say, but I gotta go for it. I remember getting down on the knee and proposing, and thankfully, she said yes. But if in that moment, she would have like hesitated, been like, well, actually, like I like you, but I don't really like you that much, and would have said no, or just there would have been this awkward pause. It would have been the absolute worst feeling in the world. And sometimes in our life, when something is going wrong, or there's a stressful situation, or we feel like we don't have control, we really need God to respond, it can feel like He's absent. It can feel like He doesn't have a response for you. It can feel like He's not listening. And that can be the most painful, frustrating, hard thing to go through because silence is difficult. No response a lot of time is worse than the response that you didn't want to get because it leaves this unknown. It leaves you questioning. It leaves you going, what happened? And in this story, I can only imagine what Mary and Martha are going through when they say, you need to come quick. Our brother is dying. He is sick. And they get no response. And Jesus waits 2 more days in the location He's at. And then when he says, we're going to go, he goes, yeah, Lazarus is already dead. Like, that has to be the most frustrating feeling for Mary and Martha to go. He could have come, he could have responded, but he didn't. Verse 17 is where we'll pick back up. It says, now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Mary and Martha to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him. But Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said, Lord, if you had been here for my brother, he would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Skip down to verse 28. It says, when she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Now the other sister gets a chance to say this to Jesus. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved, and in his spirit greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. And it says, Jesus wept. The Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? Now, not only was it both sisters that said, Jesus, if you had been here sooner, he wouldn't have died. Now, even those in the crowd just looking on say the same exact thing. And then verse 38, it says, then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and the stone lay against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen straps and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to him, unbind him and let him go. It's a pretty awesome story, right? It's a crazy cool story to see the miracle of Jesus and the power he has. But the part that always gets you is, why go through all this extra work, all this extra pain? Like, Mary and Martha had to suffer a great deal for Jesus to pull off this miracle. Why did that happen? Why couldn't Jesus have come when they asked and just taken care of it before he died, before they had to go through the suffering, the mourning, the pain? Did Jesus just want to show off and pull off a miracle or do something crazy? Why does the story take place the way it does? And the thing I want you to understand is from this story, what we see is, in our lives as well, is just because there's silence does not mean God is absent. Just because there's silence does not mean God is absent. I think all the time we place human tendencies on God, place human characteristics on God, and we think, well, if silence is the way God is responding to me, it must mean he's not there. It must mean he's not listening. Because a lot of times in our life, when somebody is silent to us, that means they don't care. They're not paying attention. They didn't get the text message. They've chosen not to respond. That's not the case with God, though. Just because he's silent does not mean he's not there. He's not walking alongside you. He's not choosing to respond. The reason he's silent sometimes is to build something inside of you. It's for a greater plan to take place. It is where faith becomes necessary. Something I heard is waiting is where faith becomes necessary. I know I've used this example before, but it is the example of, a lot of times we have the tendency to treat God like a vending machine for us, where we put in our dollar bill and we expect to immediately get something out in return, as long as it's a properly working vending machine. Sometimes they steal your money, you don't get anything. But a lot of times we expect to just put the money in and get out immediately what we want. And it's because we live in this society that says instant gratification it should be always there for you. We live in a society where we have Wi-Fi and you can type in anything you want on your computer or your phone, and within like 5 seconds it is there at your fingertips. In fact, if the Wi-Fi takes too long, you chuck your device across the room and go complain to your parents and you say, fix the Wi-Fi. This doesn't happen quick enough for me. If we want Starbucks, we just drive to Starbucks and we get it within seconds. We live in a society that says whatever you want, you should instantly have. And the problem is, it's pleasing to us, it's exciting for us, but the issue is, it doesn't take any faith. If you immediately get what you want, there's no faith required. What says is if I immediately grant every request you have, if I immediately give you everything you want, what do you need me for? I'm just a vending machine to grant your wishes, and just a magic genie in a bottle to give you what you want. There's no faith required. You don't have to step back and go, God, I don't understand what your plan is. I don't understand what's happening, but I believe in you anyway. I'm going to trust my unknown in your hands. Go, God, take care of it. You see in the story, Mary and Martha have to say, God, if you would have come sooner, you could have fixed him, but we still recognize you're God. We still have faith in you. It makes us choose between trusting the world and instant gratification or choosing God and his plan that is greater than the world. And it's not an easy choice, but it's one that God says, do you have faith in me? It might be confusing. You might not understand it. You might not get it. It might seem painful and silent and like I'm ignoring you, but do you have faith? Do you know my plan is greater? Because it's important to realize just because our deadline has expired does not mean that God's has. It doesn't mean he's just quit and he's given up and his plan is ruined now as well. You see from the very beginning of the story that Jesus has a plan. He says in verse 4, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. We see his plan from the very beginning is not to let Lazarus permanently be dead. It's there to perform a miracle for everyone to see. And we see that the sisters' plan was way different. They go, God, why didn't you come sooner? And Jesus goes, just because your deadline expired does not mean mine has. You see, my plan is greater. My plan is to perform this miracle so that everybody can see what I can do. So everybody can see that I was sent. It says, he says in verse 42, I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around me, that they may believe that you sent me. Jesus' plan was greater than the sisters' plan. And yes, it seemed terrible for them in the moment, but it's because they didn't have the godly perspective that God has. And so for us, the encouragement from this message is a lot of times it's frustrating when it feels like you're praying to God, you're requesting things, God, life is falling apart around you, and you go, God, why are you silent? Why aren't you responding? And the answer is, it's not that he's absent, it's not that he's paying attention, it's maybe that his plan is greater and bigger than yours, and his deadline is different than yours. And maybe he's saying, just have a little faith. Just trust me. I know what I'm doing. I'm God. I created you. Don't give up. Don't quit. Be still. Sit in my presence. And just wait. And just watch how this turns out. I know this is a time period where you can get easily frustrated with what's going on. Where you can get easily frustrated with God. I know I've been there. But at the same time, you have to sit. You have to wait. You have to go, God, I trust you. I have faith in you. Your plan's way different than mine. I might think my plan's better, but God, I trust you, and I know that you have a greater plan. Hopefully that gives you guys encouragement. Hopefully you can talk about that in small groups. As always, if you have any questions, if you need anything, we are always here to talk. You can always reach out to us or any of your leaders. Miss you guys. Hope to see you soon.